Yinlin, the first sub-DPS 5-star in Wuthering Waves, and seen as one of the best characters in the game. In many people's eyes, she's only beaten by Verena and maybe Jinshi, but I disagree with this notion. Yinlin, while being a strong character, gets a lot of praise that I feel is undeserved. So in this video, I'll be exploring why I believe Yinlin to be overrated. First, to know why people rate Yinlin as highly as they do, we have to know what Yinlin does, and, well, the reason she's used. Yinlin, like I said earlier, is a sub-DPS character who focuses on dealing a large amount of AoE damage during her field time, and leaving behind marks for coordinated attacks once her forte is fully charged up. Alrighty, that's all well and good. Her outro skill will also buff the next character's Resonance Liberation damage by 25%, and their Electro damage by 20%. This gives her a very clear niche that she will be used in for months, maybe even years to come. There's not really much to discuss here at a base level, so we need to think more about Yinlin's usage. When we go to Pridwin's list of pros and cons, we will see that according to them, her best attributes are her absurd damage output and unconditional source of damage. And to give credit where credit is due, this is true. Yinlin has a very large amount of damage within her kit, and doesn't really need specific circumstances to do it other than her field time, which isn't even that long. However, they are very aware that she is in fact a swap cancel oriented unit, and that is a turnoff for a lot of people, but that's not the gripe I'm going to be discussing in this video. So now that we've established her main value, let's get to why this is a complete yapfest. So if Yinlin's main value is her damage output, what happens when we take that away from her? That's right, she becomes mid. So why do I say this? It's because if you do not own a String Master, you are not going to do the damage everyone is talking about. Let me explain. String Master is an absolutely busted weapon, and there is a very good reason that it's so revered as an insane weapon. It gives some very universal stats in the form of a boatload of crit rate and attack percent, and since you can weapon share in this game, that is especially valuable. However, we cannot just expect that everyone has it, which is what the vast majority of people seem to assume, causing people who just hear their statements to regurgitate it since they don't know any better. Yinlin is here to do damage, but all her other weapons cannot come close to String Master. Your best bet is Cosmic Ripples, but that weapon is not at all synergistic with Yinlin. It's just a stat stick. Its pure base attack and attack percent substats are what is carrying it up here, and even then, it's a whole 16% worse than String Master. That may not sound like a lot, but when you realize that this is a whole 30,000 damage, it becomes a bit of an issue. Even then, you can't assume everyone has Cosmic Ripples either, especially since it's one of the worst standard 5-star weapons. You're way more likely to have Emerald of Genesis, Static Mist, or even Lustrous Razor. Okay, what else is there? There is the Battlepass weapon, Augment. At R1, it is almost 30% worse than String Master. That is an absurd damage loss. Not even funny. It's like using R1 Lumen Gloss on your Chang-Li, and she doesn't even benefit from most of its passive. Even then, it forces you to spend. It's Battlepass. Your best bet for a completely gacha 4-star option is the Jinjo Keeper, which at R1 is even worse, but still 30%. The amount of damage you lost by simply skipping one weapon is absurd. It's simply that people have heard that she does a lot of damage, and because they don't know better, they regurgitate this information without context. Okay, but what about her outro skill? Buffing Electro and Liberation damage is pretty powerful, especially with Shang Liao coming up. Kolcharo has his issues, but surely this new DPS has perfect synergy with Yinlin to prove me wrong, right? Oh, how I wish I was right. It's been established that Yinlin does a large amount of damage. So what happens when she becomes an insane buffer as well? In theory, you get an incredible team that will delete quite literally anything in a minute. In practice, you get a DPS whose numbers have been shrinked to account for Yinlin's damage numbers, which I've already established is kind of fraud without String Master. So really, in the end, we get an okay DPS paired up with a unit that could do good damage, assuming you have her weapon. And ultimately, this is the problem with Yinlin that I see in her future. her sheer damage output with String Master is limiting the potential for future Electro DPS characters, because they are going to be balanced with a String Master Yinlin in mind. So they just don't have the potential to be strong. Her current teams are mainly the teams where people just can't think of another character to put into the team, so they default to Yinlin, thanks to her damage output from off-field. But this is a very misguided action. Hell, even I'm guilty of this, putting Yinlin with characters like Changli, who don't really have great teammates. It's a great idea on paper, but without String Master, she has no place in teams like this, and she loses out to Sanhua due to her low field time and capability for double intro skill rotations. What this means is that you use your Verena field time directly into your DPS, and then you swap to your second support to do their field time and then do the DPS again. This is usually used for energy, but here it's also for the extra true sight attack for Changli, and Sanhua is extra good at this due to her absurdly low field time. So what is the point in using Yinlin without String Master? Where is she going to be used? Well, her only best-in-slot teams at that stage are going to be with Jinchi and the aforementioned Shengliao and Kalcharo. Being best-in-slot with Jinchi is very good, right? Well, she won't be best-in-slot for long, because she is going to be replaced. Speaking of which, I'm gonna go over all of the characters I discussed in my top 5 DPS video, and you will see that Yinlin doesn't have long left. Jinchi is an interesting case. She is very much benefiting from Yinlin, due to her coordinated attacks. She needs those to charge up her forte bar, because the more it's filled, the more damage her skill will do, all the way up until it's a nuclear missile. The reason most people use Yinlin here is because of her damage output, but like I've repeated an absurd amount of times, she loses a lot of this damage without String Master. And even now, using a level 1 Yuanwu with minimal investment will actually compete with Yinlin without String Master. And it's only going to get worse for her the second Zheji comes out. Then for Jian, he should be relatively straightforward. Jian has no real use for Yinlin, because his best-in-slot option was literally a 4-star that was on his own banner. He not only has a lot of buffing, but also a very low field time. And it's not just his Ultra skill either, it's also his S6, Moonlit Clouds, Impermanence Heron, and Static Mist. Jian just has no point in using Yinlin. Changli we've already slightly touched upon. While Yinlin is currently a good option for her because there are no real good skill damage buffers for Changli to take advantage of, this is changing with Zheji. And even before her release, a Sanhua allows for double intro skill, saving Changli a lot of trouble on the field. Shengliao has already been discussed, but as a refresher, his damage output was heavily butchered due to the fact that Yinlin with String Master does so much. But Yinlin will still be used here. And then lastly, Encore. Encore is a character that loves to swap cancel, and thus Yinlin is a good teammate with her. But the problem is that even if you do swap canceling, Sanhua is an incredible teammate for Encore already. She has less field time and a great Ultra skill for Encore if you decide not to swap cancel. Not to mention the dual carry team with Changli being great with her as well. Not just that, but also the fact that swap cancel teams require more skill, because usually when you're playing a very simple team, you can pay a lot of attention to the enemy, which allows for easier dodging. When you're swap canceling, you'll constantly be in animations, and you have to pay attention to what you're doing, so it'll be way harder to counter a boss's attacks. So, I hope that clarified to some of you why I believe Yinlin gets a lot more praise than she deserves. She's losing her claim to fame for being a Jinchi support really soon, and it will forever limit the power of the DPSs that can actually use her. But it's just my opinion. If you disagree with me, be sure to leave a comment, and you might as well like and subscribe. You can also join my Discord or follow me on Twitter, which are linked down below in the description and pinned comment. If you want to get into a discussion with me, these are the best platforms to reach me. But that'll be all from me. Peace.